Well, welcome back to Kano Iwanyayi broadcast with Sangwadzi Spiwe Kachiza Mapfumo. I'd like to welcome you this afternoon or morning, wherever you are. Today, we have another guest here on our Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Work. My guest today is Cecelia Ntombizodwa Mzondiwa. And welcome to the program, Cecelia.
Thank you, Tete Spiwe. I'm still working on my talk of Sangwadzi.
Sangwadzi, that's right. And the other people who might be following always wondered, what is Sangwadzi? Sangwadzi is a beloved aunt. So that's part of my brand, is Sangwadzi Spiwe Kachiza Mapfumo. Thank you. Thank you. Today's guest is an amazing woman. I've known Cecelia for a bit myself, and she always surprises me, things that she comes up with. And I really think you deserve to be on my Ordinary People Doing Extraordinary Work, because you've been doing such, amazing stuff. Cecelia is, she's a lawyer and she's an author. And she also has recently been nominated by the Grand Prairie Chamber of Commerce for small business and diversity. Yes. And so I brought you here because we want to celebrate you and the work that you're doing, Cecelia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So now tell me, Grand Prairie is up north in Canada, and you are a lawyer out there. Tell me a little bit more of what kind of law do you practice and your business.
Yeah, sure. So Grand Prairie is a northern community in Alberta. So we are like 4 hours drive away from Edmonton and away from Calgary, 8 hours. We are a community that's built on the oil and gas industry. So it's a community that goes up and down, boom and bust. But I've been privileged to live and stay here for the past 17 years. And I in my practice, so as I practice law, I decided to actually build my own law firm and my own brand. Our law firm is called On Point, and the reason for that name is that we move with the trends. We don't practice law traditionally. We practice what I call heart-centered law, meaning that we meet people where they are at. We humanize the people's experience through the justice system, and also want to help people to come through the processes whole, not broken, right? Because most times when people deal with lawyers and justice system, they come out broken, both in their pocket and in their self. So that's the brand. And then we practice family law. All that encompasses family law, from the positivity of engagement, prenup, agreements, into when people are struggling and they consider separation and divorce. So that includes parenting, child support, spousal support, matrimonial property division, everything that goes with family law. I must say that it's a heavy area of practice. It's a labor of love. Among everything else, besides our goal to make sure people don't go through this and come out crushed, it's also protecting the children within that time. So that's one area. The second area we practice in is immigration law. And immigration is a very interesting area in the sense that Canada itself as a country is built on immigration. And there's lots of immigration pathways or programs that are available. So we have been privileged to be in touch with people from all over the world who want to come to Canada for different reasons. And so it's an area that's fascinating for me. But the last one, which is around employment, human rights, it's more my experience. I've spent over 16 years in human resources before I practiced law. And so it's an area where we help organizations or people who are struggling with employment issues. So those are the basic areas of law that we practice. So I did mention that our law firm is unique in the sense that we also offer services that not traditional law firms offer. So because I'm an executive trained coach, I also coach other lawyers and leaders in the world around different things. So diversity and inclusion being an area we also provide some services. And then lastly, just we do normal things like notaries and stuff that lawyers do.
Fabulous. I think you really delved into the whole issue of your On Point, your company, and what you do, which I thought it was very interesting in the sense that you work with immigrants, a lot of immigrants, newcomers to Canada, and the services that you provide pretty much are the backbone of a new person coming here, including marriages, and things fall apart when people come here and they don't know where to go and what to do. People getting married here, and facing the whole process of immigration where you don't know what to do. You are here, and sometimes you come through a different pathway which might need some support, and I see where you're coming with that. But my goodness, Cecelia, 17 years in Grand Prairie. I'm really surprised. I mean, I know a lot of people who spend 20, 25 years in Toronto or some in Vancouver or Calgary or whatever. But Grand Prairie, how big is Grand Prairie?
So Grand Prairie is not a big city per se when we compare to bigger cities like Calgary, Edmonton, or Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. When I landed in Canada 22 years ago now, I landed in Montreal. So that's my kind of big city. But what made me move to Grand Prairie in 2006, it was the time of the boom. It was because of jobs. And so what has happened is that because I work in a provincial setting, for the most part, I'm traveling. I'm between cities, usually Calgary, Edmonton, and so I didn't feel the need to move because I'm always everywhere. And actually, have when I moved here, I moved from Banff, and when I told people I'm going to Grand Prairie, they're like, "Why would you go to Grand Prairie?" I'm like, "What's wrong with the city?" They said, "Well, it's a redneck country." So at that time, I was still new to the country. I didn't know what redneck meant. I actually thought there are people with rednecks. So I was looking around. I'm like, oh, that's a different breed I've not seen. But it meant something different. Having said that, I've actually met some very good people here. It's a very community, family-driven area. And I mean, people are here for the jobs, the money, right? Because this is an oil and gas based community.
That makes sense. I mean, you moved from Montreal, you went to Banff, you left Banff. I could live in Banff.
I lived in Banff. I worked for the Fairmount Banff Springs Hotel. So yes,
beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, we're so close to it. And it's one of my favorite places in the world. Really,
it is.
Interesting. Now let's talk a little bit about your business. And first and foremost, congratulations for the nomination. Because I see where you're coming from with that. No, let's not talk about the nomination. Let's talk about your book, and then we can lead on to the nomination of your nomination.
For sure. Yeah, so my book, which was published early this year, I think it was beginning of March, the topic, the title of the book is Beyond Tokenism. And the subtitle of it is Embracing a sense of belonging and stand out as an inclusive leader. And this was a COVID-19 project for me. And the inspiration came, I was working on writing a book about myself, but that changed on May 25, on the day when George Floyd was murdered. And for me, this was such a pivotal and turning point in my own beliefs around how, as human beings, we are still not yet civilized and still see ourselves as us and them, categorize people and treat people that way. And so that became, what I wanted to write about. And when I say beyond tokenism, people have asked me, what is tokenism? And I said, after that incident, a lot of companies were putting out statements, money on how they want to help and everything else, but it remained there for the most part. Now, fast forward, we are here in 2023. We have moved the dial a little bit, but we still have more to do in terms of ending racism. ending all sorts and forms of discrimination. And so that is what my book is based on. It's on, it is my hope that in our world we will move towards being human, because there is more that brings us together. I have yet to meet human beings who don't want a sense of belonging, who don't want to be loved, who don't want to be included. If we focus on what brings us together, actually what sets apart is very artificial and smaller than what brings us together is humanity. So that's the essence of my book.
Yeah, and it's very true. I mean, the George Floyd case did open up a can of worms. Things that a lot of organizations, companies, NGOs, everybody started participating. Even the government itself started pouring in money for to respond as a response to the incidents that happened. And so whether that has moved the dial further or not, I don't know. I don't know of any organization or company that doesn't have a diversity thing happening, though I still think diversity is one thing, racism is another thing. Yeah. You could be diverse and also still be racist. And, we talk of tokenism. My understanding of tokenism is really a facade, putting on a sort of like something that looks like there is change. So, or people giving positions just as position, but without the power. Am I right? You're the one who is a lawyer. Maybe you could better explain what it means. So the tokenism is there, and since we're talking about diversity here, it's a very relevant topic, because there are people who have moved on in the companies in the sense of the hierarchy, but without the real power. And because they look a certain color, they are brown enough, or they to make it sound like they are diverse, the organization is diverse. Is this what we're talking about in this book?
This is what I'm talking about. And in the book, I do give some examples of my own self, because I've been in leadership positions for the past 20 years. And many times I've been at the table, but not invited to my views or ideas, not heard. I think it's one of the quotes I like in diversity is that diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being invited to dance on the floor, right? So many times I was invited to the party. I am at leadership tables, and usually I am the token of diversity, because maybe I'm the only Black person on many boards that I sit. I'm the only Black person. In sometimes when I look around at the courthouse, I'm the only Black person. But in terms of people actually truly accepting that you are equally competent, and that they respect your voice, that is where the tokenism is. And a lot of organizations that I've seen, including where I live here, is that even cities, they do programs, organizations, companies, cities, they do programs to check, to put a check mark in the box to say we do DEI, and then when it comes to reality of it, they don't. I was actually talking to somebody around here, say these positions that we saw were posted, and the bulk of it said we want diversity, we want to make sure people who have lived experiences can have a voice. But when I see who was put in this commission, there is zero diversity here. So what's going on? So a lot of companies do this tokenism piece to get funding, and to attract people, so that people will say, oh, I'll go work for them because they are diverse. When you actually get in, you find that that diversity is not really respected. So that's the tokenism.
It's a number.
So for me, I think where I want to move the conversations and move our communities to is, let's move away from these check marks, numbers, things. Let's actually look at what are we doing to include people, marginalized groups, and how are we supporting people? How are we accepting people, not tolerating them, to say, okay, I can tolerate an immigrant or an LGBTQ community or a Muslim person, but how do we move forward to, yes, I accept you for who you are. I don't have to change you. I don't have to like what you are, but I accept and I respect it. That's where I hope we can move to.
That's you're right. It really we all hope we'll get there. And I mean, to a large extent, people just talk about Canada being a very liberal country and very diverse in one way or the other. And maybe to a certain point it is. But the real crux of the thing is where we look for jobs. We look, you know, acceptance of people who are different, acceptance of people of color, people acceptance of people of anything different from what would be called the norm, right? Is it there? I would say no, I doubt, because as you clearly pointed out, in most jobs, you get the title, you even get the office, but is the company's mindset really there to make any change for the people? No, and I don't think it's there yet. But I appreciate us people of color or people of minority, yeah, making an effort and pushing forward and bringing the conversation up front in books or any which way. I think it's very important. We have to keep talking. Yesterday, I attended the gender-based meeting with a whole bunch of very intelligent, brilliant women, and we were talking about exactly the same thing. But we were talking about sexism and all those things, you know, in organizations. It's important to start now. You keep pushing, and I know that it has always been there. Like the past, you know, during the is it 2020 when we had the George Floyd incident?
Yes,
That sparked it all. That kind of like tipped it, and everybody was talking about it. And I think if we get more and more people doing what you're doing, writing about it, and living in areas where it's really quite there. Clearly, people don't talk about it, but everybody knows it's there. I think
yeah,
it makes you know, it does make a difference. Which leads me to my congratulations on being nominated. These are the same organizations and the same very people who are running these corporate organizations or running cities and communities who have recognized the work that you're doing. Talk about that. What led to the nomination? Which wow, I am really impressed.
yeah. So I think what led to the nomination is a combination of things. So one thing I always believe in is that people might not really like what you do or accept who you are, but they will accept your heart. So when you add value to people, to communities, there's no other way but people to recognize that.
Mhm.
So within my practice, I do a lot of pro bono work. I also do some files from legal aid to help people who otherwise would not have access to justice.
Mhm.
A lot of us lawyers would not like to do legal aid because it doesn't pay as good,
It's no
and
money.
then you get people who really struggle with different things, substance abuse and others sometimes, right?
Mhm.
So and we do that because in my original inspiration to become a lawyer way back in Zimbabwe when I was young, it was, and I always wanted to advocate for people who need to have access to justice. At that time, it was women who didn't have the right to inherit, women who were, experiencing domestic abuse and didn't have a voice. So that those were some early inspirations for me, and so I still carry that. And then, secondly, I have been privileged to speak to many organizations. In the last 2 years, so this in 2022. I was the keynote speaker for the International Women's Day, and I spoke about diversity. And then I was invited to the Business Week in Grand Prairie to speak to businesses about the bottom line of why it's important to have diversity, but more so inclusion and belonging in the workspace, because it does improve the bottom line. And then from there, I was asked to speak to a Women Business Summit in Jasper this year in March. And then I have also been able to influence other law firms because I have talked to some law firms about diversity and inclusion. And so I would say the contribution I have done to this city that has a reputation of being redneck, um, to have the brevity and to be brave enough to talk about, a topic that most people would not want to lean into,
Yeah.
and challenge people to say, we need to change. The world is not going backwards. This is where the world is going, and we need to look into ourselves and say, what am I contributing? What am I teaching my children? How am I, relating to other, groups in the community? So that, for me, I think was what led the chamber and other people who appreciate the business to nominate. But more so also because now, having published a book, and I got an award for the book as well. So, I'm looked at as an expert in the area here in the city, right? And in Alberta as well, because I do hold, I have a government appointed position as the first ever hate crimes community liaison, which means we do, and I have a colleague in Edmonton, and our job is to work on a strategy for the government and advise the ministries of justice and public safety on what can be done for Albertans to live, in a safe world, because hate crimes, are also growing. So hate and discrimination and racism and all these things are interlinked. And so with all that together, that is what has, people are recognizing as, okay, we recognize you as a force to reckon with, as somebody who is really advocating for marginalized groups. And I do that because truly, I also have a child. I have a 5-year-old, and I would want her to live in a safer and inclusive world where she can become who she wants to be, despite her race. Because she came to me 3 months ago and said, "Mom, I want to be white," and she was coming from preschool. And
How old is she?
she's 5. She was in preschool, and
She
so
was
this
white.
really, it threw me off. And I'm like, I am supposed to be an expert in this area. I didn't know what to say. So I just asked her, I said, "So what color are you, Mia?" And she said, "I'm brown, but I want to be beautiful. So I want to be white and have blue eyes."
Yeah.
So
All
I
this
don't
is
know what happened, what led to it, what fed into that. But I also, that's the reason why I do what I do. I want our children, because really kids don't care. It's what we teach them in our families, in our
and they
schools.
also, they're very honest. I wouldn't come to you and say I want to be white, because then I'll have long hair. I can't, because I'm an adult, right?
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
what image them. But a child, the influence of people around them, the
yeah,
influence of television, social media, and all that stuff, it keeps going. And unless and until we have parents who can kind of help them move towards feeling all right by being themselves, we
yes.
won't be going far. We won't be going far at all.
Yeah, no, and I try, so I'm trying every time to reinforce, "You're beautiful, Mia. Dark skin is good. You don't need to go, what is it called? Um, you don't blush. You
And then
don't,
you don't have to suntan
you
when your
don't go
skin is already
tanning. You
brown.
don't. Yeah, so I'm trying to find the positive things to reinforce that, which we shouldn't have. But I want to touch on something that you mentioned, because it's something that, ourselves as Canadians, and this is my brave speak to the Canadian community. um, when it comes to issues of racism, we always say, "Oh, the problem is in the, down south in the United States. We
Mm,
don't have that here in Canada." But the racism here is subtle, it's insidious, and
mhm.
it's what somebody coined it as death by 1,000 stabbings, because it's very difficult to deal with. It's kind of undercurrent and very difficult to challenge. From a human rights, I practiced human rights law, and it's something that it's kind of nebulous because it's under the ground. And
Yep.
so we do have racism that needs to be tackled here in this country. Of course, we don't have everyday people being gunned down because you're black. We have had those incidences, if Muslim family being, run down by a car, and or things like that. But we still have issues here in Canada, and we need to address that. So I just wanted to put that out there.
And I think also to raise awareness in people, because I think the worst is when an injustice is being done, and the person that is being done to doesn't really realize that this is not fair, this is not okay. They might feel uncomfortable, but they might not even realize that legally that person should not be doing that to you. I think raising that awareness is also important. And I think what you and me are doing right now to talk about it, and someone watching and realizing that, oh, so I can actually do something about it, I think it's important. That is the beginning.
It is the beginning, and a lot of what I hear in the different capacities I hold is a lot of abuse happens in the school, and it breaks my heart when I hear parents, coming and saying my child has been called a monkey, or things that you don't think happen, right? And so of course, what one of the things too that I have had to learn is that the resistance we get from populations that don't experience it,
Mhm.
populations, groups that are privileged not to experience it, and a lot of them, they have sensitivity to the word privilege. And I always say, you know what, we all carry some privilege at different moments, right? As a lawyer, I have privileges that I hold. As a leader in different spheres, I do have some privileges, and there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's the awareness to create and say, yeah, okay. So when we talk about white privilege, a lot of people have sensitivity to that, and they react to it. But if you have never experienced being discriminated against, you don't know what it is. I think what people need to do is to say, oh, I wasn't aware that's what's going on. Help me
Exactly.
understand, rather than being resistant and say, okay, yeah, yeah, you can't say Black Lives Matter, so white lives matter too. That's beside the point. That's missing the point. We do know that every life matters, but we are
But
saying
then,
there has been in the, yeah,
Cecilia, to me, I keep saying when I encounter people who are like that kind of defensiveness, to me, there is no worse racism than that, because then they perpetuate it
yeah,
because they
yeah,
do not want to face it, and it's not an how can an indictment on anybody. It simply is.
yeah,
If it is, I mean, and we're talking about it, let's talk about it.
yeah. It's
Accept and acknowledge that it exists, and then you can only move forward once you acknowledge it. But that sense of privilege and not realizing that you're privileged and really shutting down like that, to me, that is the worst kind of racism. It really annoys me because you can actually talk to me. It's something else just being racist, looking at me and say I look like a monkey, I've got dark skin and whatnot, and then just ignoring me. That's something. But it's worse when we're trying to address it and I talk to somebody and then they shut down. They say, "Oh well, white lives matter." What are you saying? You don't want to acknowledge it. You don't want to look at it. You don't want to move forward, right?
Yeah, no, and I think that one of the things I've understood working in this field is how our brain works, because our brain was designed to protect us. So when we talk about unconscious bias, microaggressions, and I think as human beings, whatever to the brain, whatever seems different is a potential threat, and what is similar looks like something of comfort and security to us. And I have had to, like what people say, eat my own humble pie.
Mm.
When I think back of, you and I, we come from Zimbabwe. When Zimbabwe was doing well, we had people from Malawi coming
Mhm.
to work on our farms, in our mines, and we would make fun of them. So for me, that was a learning to say, at that time, I didn't understand my own privilege. And I thought they were less than because, they were different. They were coming from another country. And so coming here, when I experienced that too, I was like, oh my God, this hurts, right?
Mhm.
And so the awareness of challenging ourselves, you were talking of gender, and
Mhm.
myself being, an acclaimed feminist, so to say, wanting women to do well and all, but I'm on a plane maybe every other week or something like that. So the other time I was coming to Calgary, and then I hear the pilot is a female voice, and then I thought, I hope we are okay.
See?
So I think the one thing I want to leave people with is that we are all biased. As long as you have a brain, you can be biased. We all can be discriminatory in one way or the other. I come from a country which didn't allow LGBTQ, so I had to deal with all some of those. The biggest thing, we need each individual 8 billion of us on this planet to do, is to have the awareness and check our biases, check our, ourselves when we have these negative emotions towards different groups, and say, why am I feeling that? And catch ourselves.
On that note, thank you, Cecelia, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing out there to support people who are less privileged and maybe would not be able to have their voices heard, and supporting newcomers, immigrants is so important. And I appreciate that, and congratulations for this. And I'm not surprised that your Chamber of Commerce, they recognize the work that you're doing. Good job, and keep going.
Thank you. No, thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do as well. I always follow you. So thank you so much for featuring ordinary people who are doing extraordinary things, because that's what you're doing.
Oh, thank you, ordinary person doing extraordinary work. Thank you so much. And for everybody, keep following us, like, subscribe, and we'll keep moving. Thank you so much. And I will be seeing you next week with another ordinary person doing extraordinary work. And good night. This is good night, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Ntombizodwa Kachiza Mapfumo. Good boy. Good